Mm.
All right, welcome back to Double Fries No Slaw. We are chatting with Alex Powers, former Florida State softball player and current ACC network analyst. Alex, how you doing?
I'm fantastic. It's a beautiful day outside, so I can't complain.
And have you already left? Are you already up, ready to cover this
No.
thing? Or
No, I'm still in Florida right now. I leave tomorrow and I'll be at the ESPN networks doing studio stuff for ACC.
do you? I know a lot of softball fans that'll watch this, like
Yeah.
probably are already aware, but you do some stuff in studio.
Yeah.
Obviously, at the end of the tournament last week, you went out and covered up at BC. You were
Yeah.
at Duke. Do you like and then through the year covered a bunch of games for both Florida State, UCF, other places. Do you like doing the network stuff better? Do you like being there on site? Like, do you have a
Yeah.
preference?
It's a totally different vibe. So I love calling the game because I think that when you call games during the season, it's your opportunity to kind of share your knowledge, a little bit of like the insight as to how you approach games and your competition and stuff as a player. But then doing like studio stuff, it's a whole different atmosphere, right? Like in general, just like the whole setting, the glam, everything like on the fun side there. But then it's so fast and you don't get the opportunity to dive in like in depth and as deep into storylines, games, teams, that whole thing. So it's just different. I like them both, but I like them for a lot of different reasons. So
Yeah. So Florida State in the regional this weekend. Just overall big picture.
mhm.
I think a lot of Florida State fans and maybe even, Kocha and the players that were on the team would say last year was probably a little bit disappointing. Like got figured it out late and they were really trending up, and then you kind of get paired with the region of death having to go to Norman.
Yeah.
But they certainly peaked late last year, which was good to see. This year, I don't even really know if I thought much about expectations for Florida State softball going into the year. Like, you're always going to want to compete for the ACC. You're always going to want to host a regional and then hopefully a super later. But I don't know that I thought it was a make or break. You've got to hope you've got to host a super regional or, fire sale everything. I think a lot of it was determined on pitching and how well they would
Mhm.
do in the circle because they struggled there so much. But if you look big picture at FSU's, regular season and then ACC run, how would you grade it? Above average, kind of what you expected, or have they been better?
I would say that Florida State's having a better year than I would have anticipated. I think though, like that's part of the standard that we have worked tirelessly the last, 15 years to build is you don't necessarily look at every year expectation wise, oh, this is where I expect them to be in a super regional in the World Series or whatever. But you look at the body of work, the program as a whole, and you expect them to be a top 15 contender every year because that's what the program, that's what the culture breeds, right? And so when you look at that, it's more of like a dynasty of work and the legacy that has been built. But you look at year to year, and yeah, last year we lacked depth in the circle, we lacked different things, and so this year you always look to reload and kind of recover. So I don't think anybody would have necessarily expected them to have done as well as they have, sitting in that top five seed. But I'm also not surprised. So I don't know if that answers the question, but you've got to expect greatness, right? If that's where you want
Yeah.
to be consistently, like you should expect that.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's, your program expectations they're exactly where they're supposed to be, right? And
Yeah.
then I think you do look at like each individual season and you look at the talent you've got, and you've gotten big performances from freshmen, you've gotten unexpected performances early in the year from like
Yeah.
Kennedy Harp and people that you maybe didn't expect. Danley has certainly rebounded in a big way. Absol's come in and done some good things. So yeah, I think that you're exactly right. Like you don't lower your program expectations, but I think that I would be with you. Like if you'd have told me before the season they're going to be a top five seed
Yeah.
and win an ACC regular season, I'd have said, "Yep, sign me up for that." Like
Yeah.
I'm all about it.
Yeah.
In that ACC championship, which you were there and covered, they lose they win the first two games, lose the final game to Clemson in an absolute heartbreaker. Is I'm the eternal optimist, so maybe this is just me putting an incredibly positive spin on it. You certainly would have liked to hold on and get those final two outs and win the game. Like, there's no question
Mhm.
about it. Is there a way that gets spun into a good thing though? Like, is there a way where that does kind of refocus you to where you're a little bit more intentional about the way you go around about the next couple of weekends?
Always. I think anytime you lose a game, right, you're supposed to take information from that game and allow it to make you better and hope it catapults you forward. And Florida State's very good at the information collection and how can we get that translated and move to on-field production, right? And so you also remember that you have to take care of business every single day. Doesn't matter the opponent, doesn't matter if on paper you are better, you've got to figure out ways to adapt and continue to adjust. And I think that that's what we saw in that ACC championship game was Clemson did a better job of it. And so you've got to just tip your cap and know that, hey, anybody can be beat because there are a lot of good teams out there. There's a lot of good players in conference, out of conference, right? So that's just kind of where you're at. And you look back on what happened and you know that Florida State is capable. Again, on paper, they're a better team, but they didn't play better that day. And I think that it's a good reminder that we've got to keep showing up.
They go into the regional this weekend. They play Robert Morris first game. Obviously would be, I don't think Vegas sets lines for regional softball games just yet, but they would be a huge favorite in this game. But how do you take exactly what you just said about the way that you focus? How do you take that and put that into application when you're going into a game where, I mean, shoot, even the other team expects you to come out and win?
Yeah, I think one of the best sayings that Florida State has, and a lot of programs use this, is be where your feet are. And that present state of mind and that intention pitch to pitch is how you kind of refocus that state of mind and not getting ahead of yourself because you can't worry about winning tomorrow or a week from now if you don't take care of business today. And I think that, there's been different things that have happened throughout the season, and I call them the more humbling moments that remind us to stay in that present state of mind. And I think that it's a maturity thing. I think that it takes time. I think it takes failure to get to the ability to think in that kind of way.
So Auburn USF, the other matchup there, obviously USF winning their conference, Auburn, playing the toughest conference that there is in the SEC week in and week out. So a couple of teams that Florida State certainly on any given day could lose to, but should be favored in. And this, you host a regional for a reason. You're a top 5 seed for a reason. What about maybe each of those teams that you might play on Saturday would be the thing to watch for Florida State fans?
If you're Robert Morris, you come in with no fear. You're sitting in the lower seed in the regional, and you can just go out there and enjoy the moment. And I think that there's like a dangerous aspect to that when the pressure is not on you as a team because you get to just play free, play loose. And if you lose, so what? Nobody really expected anything if you're coming in that last seed. But you can really come in and shake some things up because you don't have that pressure that maybe a Florida State or in general another team as a higher seed is playing with. And again, like pressure is a lot and pressure can be debilitating, but pressure really is a privilege. But it really humbles people quickly. And I think we forget that sometimes too. Everybody's human out there, right? And knowing that if you're same like USF coming off of a historic season, a conference championship and what they've been able to do under Coach Erickson, who knows how to win at the highest levels, right? Like these aren't necessarily players that have been on stages like this at the conference championship having won and all these things, right? But this is a coach that has been in gold medal games and played on an international scale. So the experience and expertise that he has is awesome. And then again, you take an Auburn team that plays consistent, great talent every week in the SEC, and knowing that even though they haven't had the on-field success in maybe the win column sitting really high, this is a team that every single week is coming out and playing phenomenal teams and really smart, talented opponents.
If you're Coach Almeida, do you pitch Widra against them, or
Ooh,
do you try to avoid that, or she? I mean, she knows the hitters too. Like
yeah.
is it what are you doing if you're in her shoes?
I'm gonna go with who's hot. Like, I mean, there's something to be said about going in there with like a chip on your shoulder a little bit, and maybe Weidra has that. But I also think there's probably like no bad blood, and you just want to take your team to the level of whatever's next, right? You want to show up in that day, perform, and then move on. And it's not like, the back and forth like drama of where she came from, where she is now, but there might be a little excitement and maybe a little bit of that mentality of I'm gonna show you and I'm gonna prove myself here because I've had a great experience. I'm having a great year, and I just want to keep tacking on to that. But I want the team to win. So I don't know that I would go with anybody based on just history. I'm going with who's hot because I need wins every single time I step on the field, every inning.
Yeah. The pitching has been pretty on, in that ACC tournament, you can correct me if I'm wrong here. I think the only 2 earned runs in the tournament was the home run. I think the Duke game, they didn't give anything up in the first game. The
Yeah.
second game, both runs were unearned. And
Yeah.
so the pitching's been on, I mean, it stinks to lose a game 2-1. We'll talk about hitting in a minute. But if, if you did have, like, say it does get to a deciding game, like maybe you win your first
Mhm.
two, but you lose the third one and you play for it all. Who do you feel like has been FSU's best pitcher here lately?
Yeah, I'm always going to go at Ashton Danley just because being, more of somebody that's down in the zone, she doesn't tend to, knock on wood, get things to leave the yard a lot, and just knowing that her success a lot of the time is the defense behind her too. I have a lot of trust in that. If I'm Florida State, if I know if Ashton Danley's on, that's what I'm getting. But also, I'll be honest, like you've got four girls on staff that have legit innings and numbers, but you've also got that fifth arm with McKenna Reed. So if the game does get to that game seven on the weekend, that if game on Sunday, I mean, I'm potentially throwing five, six pitchers. Like you are going to see somebody different every time I step out on the field, if that's what it comes down to, right? Because at this point in the game, winning is the most important thing. And however I have to get that done, I'm going to do it.
The hitting for Florida State feels like we were talking off air. It's been I don't know if boomer bust is the right word because they've won some 4 or 5 run games. Like, but it feels like at times they'll either score 9 or 10 runs or they'll score 1 or 2. And if their pitching can just be elite, they'll win that 1 or 2
Mhm.
run game. But even in that Clemson game, I think they had 8 hits, but they went 0 for 8 with runners in scoring position, right? And so they
Yeah.
out hit Clemson by far. I think it was 8-3 in
Mhm.
hits, but they just couldn't get the timely hit. Um, obviously nothing that has happened to this point matters anymore because it's a new
Mhm.
season. But just thoughts on trying to pull out of some of that. Is that a lineup shakeup that's needed? Is that just a focus that's needed at times? What are your thoughts on some of the hitting struggles?
I think that I've been a firm believer, all postseason for sure, the last couple of weeks specifically, of your best hitters have to be hitting at this point in the season. Like we ride the wave, we ride the roller coaster. You try not to ride the highs too high, you try not to ride the lows too low, but your best players have to be dialed in right now. Doesn't mean they have to be getting the game winning hit every time, but they need to be having good at bats, competitive at bats, because momentum is everything. And from an offensive standpoint, I've got to have people that I can trust in the batter's box to be in a present state of mind. Again, they don't need to be getting the big hit all the time, but as long as they're dialed in mentally, emotionally, I know that physically they're there too. And that's really where it starts. And you're right. I think we saw a lot in the ACC tournament, especially that there were a lot of the teams getting the wins that didn't have more hits on the board on the day. It was like just the timeliness is everything. And that's ultimately what wins ball games. And that's what we saw in that championship game with Clemson. That's what we saw in general through the week. And it's doesn't do me any good if I get, 10 hits in the ball game if one every single one is a single and two I'm not getting those hits when I've got people in scoring position and part of what Florida State does well is their ability to manufacture runs in a lot of different ways. But the power game is important. They've got to have people hitting extra base hits. And more often than not, in games that they win, they have somebody leaving the yard too, right? And just knowing that a couple of those components are going to be crucial to their offensive success is everything. But then you look at their lineup and the way that it's been stacked the last couple of games, we have had some lineup movement, which is what you asked about as well. And you have moved Beecham down to maybe get some better pitches and try to alleviate that pressure that maybe she's putting on herself. And so she's not in those moments anymore and hopefully having some better at bats. But you've got some seniors right there in the middle and the bulk of the lineup that it's also a very difficult situation to navigate and you don't know until you've been in those shoes exactly of being the senior. It feels like the pressure is on you that I've got to get the job done, but trying to keep them present and remind them, hey, nothing is different. You've worked, your whole career to be able to get this opportunity. So when people are on base, don't press, don't swing outside yourself. Stay loose, stay comfortable, and just let your training take over and everything instinctual that you've worked on up until this point.
We talked about like who you would throw if it got to that if game. Do you have a prediction? Do you have a thought like how this regional goes down? Do you think Florida State's able to handle business? Can they do it 3-0? Will it go to that if game? What are your thoughts on maybe how this thing shakes out?
Yeah, I would love to say that I think it'll go 3-0, and I hope that the loss against Clemson kind of sparks that and that fierceness or competitiveness out on the field that maybe, not saying they ever would have approached it like a walk in the park, because nothing at this point in the year is a walk in the park. Every team is coming out every day they play with their best stuff, right? That's just what it is. But I hope that they use that loss and allow it to fuel them and say, hey, we're hungrier now than we ever have been, or we want it right now more than we ever have. And they've got a really hefty list of seniors. And looking again at the roster, it's like there's no other time than now. And we've worked our whole career to build up to this point. So,
Yeah, I feel pretty good about it. I like the matchups too. I don't know if they'll do 3-0 or if they've got to win an extra game to do it, but or not an extra game, but if they have, we'll have to fight back or whatever. But I do really like the way that they're pitching right now. I think playing at home is nice too, and they obviously play really, really well there and have scored a lot of runs. People will comment. We talked about this off air. People will comment like, well, you just got to focus on this weekend before we can look at next weekend. So maybe we'll have you next week to talk about this if we get there. But just thoughts on, and I've seen a lot of people that have already kind of, when they're filling out their brackets, have already kind of moved Texas Tech, the 12 seed, ahead into Oklahoma City. And I know that Kennedy will be a very tough matchup. Shoot, you might see her 3 times in a weekend
yeah.
because when she pitches, they certainly ride her, and she pitches really well.
Mhm.
With some of Florida State's struggles, like how much, again, we don't have to play this weekend. So before I get a bunch of comments about this, how much does Kennedy like worry you? But before we even
Mhm.
get to that weekend.
Yeah, a lot. I mean, there's a reason that she was the reigning national player of the year. She's legit and her stuff is legit. She does it on both sides of the field. She's one of the best athletes in college right now. And I think what makes her so deadly is the fact that she's got an elite level rise ball that has good jump, has good velocity. It's really hard. She's very powerful. And then she's really developed a disgusting changeup as well. And knowing that that combination of something high and hard and then something down and soft is really tough as a hitter, because you've got to commit to one or the other and you can't effectively hit both. And if you get in 2 strike counts, you're just trying to battle at that point, right? You're not as much on the hunt as you are on the defensive with your swings. And so knowing that, she's on the other end of that threat. Yeah. And I've seen a lot of the same brackets, and yeah, people have discounted Florida State and said, no, Niger Kennedy's going to upset them. But I have to also take into consideration the fact that one of the things that Florida State does so well is, like I mentioned a little bit ago, is take the information and learn and figure out how to apply it to different results on the field. And I do think that if it comes down to a Florida State, Texas Tech super regional, I do think you're going to see Niger Kennedy in all 3 games. You look at the stats, and she's got more than double the innings of any other pitcher on staff. Now, that's a really heavy load to try to carry if you're Kennedy. I also think that's why she chose to go to a program like Texas Tech, is to carry and to wear that load and that responsibility. But she's still only human and she's still a kid. So you've got to know that you can get that too, right? And you fight for it every day. And if you're Florida State, you know that your strength is the depth in the circle, and it's not at the same look every time somebody steps out on the field. I've got 4, 5, 6 pitchers that can throw at any given point in the game.
Should be fun to see. Tell us what's your schedule this weekend? When are you
Yeah.
on? When are you live? I guess through all of it, it'll be like a marathon for you Friday through
It
Sunday. But
definitely
yeah,
will.
when are you on ACC Network?
Yeah, it definitely will. So we had a historic 9 teams make NCAA postseason this year, which was awesome. That also means I'm covering 9 teams throughout the whole weekend. So from the ACC network, I will have you covered following games every single day. So I think Friday, my show is like 6:30 ish on the network once games wrap up, and then the rest of the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, it's once games finish. So it could be who knows? Right now it's slotted for 8 o'clock, but it could be 10, 11, 11:30 p.m. and then they'll run all night. And it's just recapping all the teams and how they've done throughout the regional. So
Yeah, watched a ton last week and can't wait to see it again
yeah.
this week. I won't let you go without asking this too. Obviously, we're very well familiar with what Kocha is going through and
Yeah.
her battle right now. I know you've been asked about it a million times, but I'm going to ask a million and one here. Just thoughts around her, thoughts around the support from the community, thoughts on the way that she's handled this thing. I saw a quote yesterday that she gave, in her regional press conference that was just, essentially, listen, I'm just, I get so excited when I see the Braid logo because I think about how many people are supporting this whole battle, not just
Yeah.
me. And so, from everything from her, maybe I'm stealing all your answers, but everything from her match to TMH and everything she's doing, it's been obviously not, nobody's happy that she's going through this, but it has been neat to watch her battle and include so many other people with it.
Yeah, the thing about Coach A is she's one of the most inspirational and just impactful people that I've ever met in my life. I consider her like a second mom. And it's no surprise, I think, to so many of us that know her, the legacy that she's left in all of our lives. But it's really cool to see the legacy and the impact she's having on a national scale. And the people that have really stepped up to rally behind her has been so inspirational because we got to see it every day and we got to learn and live and be loved by that kind of leadership because she is one of the most genuine and caring people that I've ever known. And so for her to get that kind of support, I mean, it has to mean so much to her. It means so much to us, right? But we're not the ones fighting the fight. And I think that you just leave and walk away every day inspired.
Alex, I appreciate you for jumping on and
Yeah.
hanging out. We will be watching